Hi there. Today we'll be talking about some useful expressions that we can use in argumentative exam questions. So let's begin. First, we can put forward arguments in the following structure: introduction plus three pieces of evidence plus a conclusion. For example, 1. You can claim that unhealthy comics do harm to children. And 2. Children are curious and may regard themselves as characters of the books. 3. They cannot control their emotions and many do silly things or even harm themselves or our society. 4. Many juvenile crimes are committed by the youngsters when they copy the themes and acts of those unhealthy comics. Second, we can use comparative language, such as, one should be aware of the harm of gambling. It is the same as taking drugs, and the person who is addicted to this bad habit will ruin his life. 3. You can also try to use your past experience. You are arguing on the basis of past experience when you say that students who wish to have a good mastery of the language must have a good foundation. Some useful phrases. As a start, to begin with means to start with. 2. By common consent means everyone agrees that. 3. Obviously means it is obvious that. 4. It is an objective idea to, or it is a correct attitude to. For example, it is an objective idea to support the anti-smoking campaign. 5. A public outcry against, or a public outcry for. This means demand. For example, there is a public outcry against lenient punishment on violent criminals. 6. It is often argued that, or it is debatable. 7. We cannot afford to overlook, or we cannot neglect. For example, we cannot afford to overlook the problem of pollution as our health is at stake. Phrases to support a strong argument. 1. To substantiate my stand means to back up my point. For example, to substantiate my stand, smoking in the public should be strictly prohibited. Please note that before this expression there must be a subject clause. 2. It is easy to dig out that means it is easy to find out that. 3. Presumably means that we may assume that. 4. More regard means much concern. For example, more regard should be given to the old. 5. Weigh heavily means to trouble the mind of. For example, this problem weighs heavily in the mind of. 6. A decisive point means an important point. 7. Find out the origin means to find out the reason of something. 8. To cope with means to adapt to or to solve a problem. For example, the new immigrants find it difficult to cope with the new living environment. It's time the government found some means to cope with the problem of those old blocks with poor firefighting installations. 9. To put a halt to means to ban. For example, what is called for is to put a ban or halt to the spread of pollution. 10. It is convincing that. For example, it is convincing that young people should take up more healthy activities rather than roaming in video game centers and billiard centers. They should be active teenagers and not hooligans. 11. To be optimistic means to look at the bright side of things. For example, to be optimistic, the problems can have its effect minimized with the cooperation between the government and the public. 12. To be pessimistic means to look at something from a negative point of view. For example, to be pessimistic, crime cannot be totally eradicated without the joint force of all parties. 13. There is no reason why, meaning there is no excuse. For example, there is no reason why the government have not built more aged homes for the old. 14. With a view to, meaning with an aim at or with an objective of. For example, to provide more recreational activities to the old and young with a view to developing a stronger physique. 15. First and foremost, meaning most important. For example, I agree to the first and foremost important point of your argument. 16. It is common that, meaning usually have a clear picture of or have a clear understanding of. 17. It is ideal that, meaning it is the best that. 18. Call for much attention, meaning to draw much of our attention. 19. To a greater or lesser degree, means to a certain extent. For example, to a greater or lesser degree, television plays an important role in our daily life. And we may use the following phrases for ending. 1. From the above mentioned, meaning from what has been discussed. 2. On the whole, meaning generally speaking. 3. After weighing the pros and cons, we may come to a conclusion that. 4. From the above analysis, we may have a clear picture that. 5. It is wise to say that. This is to point out there are good and bad effects on a topic. For example, it is wise to say that if the mandatory language policy is carried out gradually, it will benefit both the students and teachers. 6. To conclude, meaning to sum up or to wind up. 7. In conclusion, or conclusively, this is old-fashioned English. 8. I dare say that. This phrase can be used after any expression in the last paragraph. For example, from the above analysis, I dare say that if the government pays no attention on X, the problem will become more serious. 9. After focusing one's attention on the merits and demerits of, we believe. 10. We can tell easily which does us more harm than good. Or we can say that which is of more important to us. 11. Judging from what I've seen and heard, I therefore have good reasons to say that. For example, judging from what I've seen and heard, I've good reasons to say that our education system has many deficiencies. Advantage or disadvantage. Transitions. A. To list or introduce advantages. The main advantage of, the most important advantage of, one advantage of, an additional advantage of, one major advantage of. It is often suggested that, it is often believed that, a further advantage of. All these phrases above can be used to list advantages or introduce advantages in an essay. Some examples. One advantage of having parents arrange a marriage is financial security. One of the main advantages of using a computer is the fact that you can save time. One major advantage of living in a foreign country is that you have better economic conditions. Here's a sample essay. Advantages of using cell phones. The most important advantage of using cell phones is that you can use them almost everywhere without cables or electricity. By using mobile phones, you can communicate with everyone whenever you want and wherever you are. Besides this, if there is an urgent situation, such as an accident or a meeting with someone, you certainly need a mobile phone. Furthermore, you can access the internet by using a cell phone. Recently, the most common way of communication in the world has been the WhatsApp. Cell phones include this system. In this way, you can communicate with someone for cheaper than a normal call. The following is a practice essay. Please try to fill in the blanks, pause the video, and press play again when you're finished. Next, we will introduce some ways to list or introduce disadvantages. The main disadvantage of, the most important drawback of, one disadvantage of, one major disadvantage of, and another disadvantage of, an additional disadvantage of. Exercise. Complete the following by adding the appropriate transitional words in the topic, sentences, and the paragraphs. Please pause the video now, complete the fill in the blanks, and press play again when you're ready. Exercise answers. Disadvantages of using a computer. One of the major disadvantages of using computers is that staring at a screen for long periods of time can be harmful to the eyes. 2. Disadvantages of having a car. There are certain disadvantages to having your own car. Firstly, you have to maintain and repair your car regularly. Therefore, you need to spend a considerable amount of money to keep the car in good condition. Moreover, driving sometimes can be extremely stressful. For example, being caught in a traffic jam is not only irritating but also time-consuming. As a result, if you want to have a car, you should consider all of the disadvantages. 3. Disadvantages of using a computer. The main disadvantage of using a computer is that staring at a screen for long periods of time can be harmful to the eyes. Secondly, sitting on a chair for hours at a time is certainly not healthy. Moreover, computers draw one's attention away from social interactions such as a conversation. In addition, people who stay at home tend to use their computers can become antisocial. And finally, computers do many jobs and people do the less. Therefore, plenty of people lose their jobs.